This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Franny's Pharmacy.
Now more than ever, it's important that our society focuses more on our mental and physical health. At Franny's Pharmacy, the team is committed to their community's need of being happy, healthy, and stress-free. Come learn how Franny's Pharmacy can assist you in a clean, professional environment with their expert bud tenders that are excited to educate you about the benefits of their lab-tested, DEA-certified CBD products. Franny's Pharmacy also offers wholesale and franchise opportunities. Visit their website at frannysPharmacy.com, and that's pharmacy with an F, and use the promo code CannaConnect10 for an exclusive Cannabinoid Connect discount. Again, that's Franny's Pharmacy with an F.com and use the promo code CannaConnect10 for an exclusive Cannabinoid Connect discount. Franny's Pharmacy, putting the farm back into pharmacy.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Canna Health.
Hey cannabis consumers, have you ever consumed a cannabis product thinking it'll make you feel a certain way, but then it doesn't? Don't you wish you had a clear understanding of your own DNA so that you could make informed decisions about what type of cannabis products interact best with your system? Well, now you can with EndoDNA. EndoDNA is a simple DNA test that maps your entire endocannabinoid system and then matches that summary with a specific cannabinoid ratio and terpene profile that best aligns with your unique genotype. Imagine being armed with personal information when visiting a dispensary. You'll have the knowledge and power and capability to purchase products that best align with your genotype. Visit their website to purchase the EndoDNA Collection Kit and Endo Decoded Report at endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. Again, that's endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. The future of cannabinoid therapeutics is here with EndoDNA. Hello, Krista. How are you?
Hey, Kevin. I'm doing well. How are you? Happy Friday.
Yes. Happy Friday. We were just talking before we started recording. By far, Friday is obviously the best day of the week. And we made it. So congratulations.
we made it.
Yeah. And every week it seems like in the cannabis industry is a bit of a struggle to get through. I mean, with so much going on, particularly, I'm interested to hear what's happening in Canada, which is, I know, where you're based. But before we talk about that, Krista, again, before we started recording, we also talked about these short videos that you're putting out on LinkedIn. And as I was preparing for this conversation, I saw those videos, and I got to tell you, you're like a pro when it comes to explaining, somewhat complex subject matter to an audience to then consume it and digest it and understand it. You're like, okay, here's the problem, and here's what we should do, and here's what you can do. It's great. So keep those up for sure.
Thank you. I'm really flattered. You know what? It's funny. It's when we started doing those videos, it was really because there were topics that were coming up that I wanted to make sure that as an industry we knew about and we knew what to do with. But I was like, I don't know how to explain this written on LinkedIn that is like compelling in any way. So I guess I'll record a video and see what happens. And now it's a series. So every Tuesday, find out more about pricing compression on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I know that we're going to dive into a lot of that subject matter in this conversation today, which I'm really excited to do. Before we do that, let's just kind of kick it off with you and your background. I mean, what led you to this point where you're the co-founder and CEO of Vetrina Group, basically a consulting firm that specializes in the retail cannabis space?
I mean, it was really walking into one of the first rec environments in Canada and realizing that it could be better. And it wasn't said that it was because it was like, oh, there's nothing interesting going on here. No, it was like watching customers walk around the store, not knowing what to purchase, realizing that coming from my background of retail, money was walking out the doors with customers. And I was like, there is something here. I came from retail and had always worked in fashion apparel. And so was really thinking about like, what is the relationship between the customer and the sales environment? And how do we connect customers with the right products to make them feel really good? And I was like, you know what, cannabis retail is a similar environment in that ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to make our customers feel good. And to be able to do that, they have to trust us. They have to understand the products that they're purchasing. And in that first experience in that store, I was like, this is going to be a problem. So we started working with cannabis stores from that point on and kind of was like, you know what? We can be much more specific with the way that we interact with our customers. We can design stores in a way that will support decision making. And that has like also translated to inventory and assortment decisions too. So here we are.
Wow. Okay. So I guess my first question is, as you were first introduced to this opportunity, right, when Canada went legal as a country, what were some of those early mistakes, or I guess missed opportunities, I should say, that you saw some of these retail owners experiencing?
This is a really interesting question because I'm watching it play out again and again in the US as states legalize. And so the stores are built for the industry as it goes legal. So what does that usually look like? It usually looks like a lot of customers, not a lot of store density, and customers are just looking to be able to purchase cannabis in a legal avenue. So you build massive stores with tons of display space that carries a ton of products, and you hope that you're going to connect with the customer. The reality is that the market starts to get more dense, both in terms of product differentiation as well as store accessible points, I guess, or more stores being open. And now these massive stores that we built no longer are needed because we don't have as many customers shopping in the store at the same time. And so we built a store for the business today, not necessarily looking forward into what it could be or what it will be. And I think that there is a need when we're thinking about cannabis retail because it is relatively new from a recreational market perspective to be building a store that is really agile. So it can grow, it can shrink, it can change with you as the market changes because it will continue to change.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And I think it's so evident, especially in cannabis, because of I would frame it as like the consumer evolution, right? Like
Mhm.
there are new entrants in this market that have little to no understanding of product formulation, potency, dosing, effects, right? I mean, all the above, even medicinal benefits, like we're still learning, right? So um, it's very important to focus on, like you said, that agile model so that you can scale as the industry is growing itself.
Yeah, a really good example is like some of the first stores that opened in Canada didn't have any space for fridges because beverages were not approved products when we went legal. Well, the reality is that about a year and a half or 2 years later, they were legal. And now we needed to create a space for beverages. And so, was it going to be that they were out on display, or did we need fridges? And this type of change in terms of product format is impactful in it being brought to the market. But what about one day when maybe 45 or 50% of all of our sales aren't flour? What does that store look like? And how do we make sure that the store can evolve and change? And where might that store be that the predominant products that they sell are not flour or inhalable products? And so like this is the pieces that I sit and ask myself every day is like, how are we building an agile retail environment to be able to respond to these things? Because the market, to your point, is going to change, especially as we get new entrants and the market share grows.
Mhm. I want to save the predictions for what the cannabis retail environment will look like in the future. So hold on
Okay.
that. But
Put a pin in that.
yeah, put a pin in that one. But one thing that I'm also curious about is how important that first impression is when it comes to the retail environment, right? Like I can't imagine how many detractors you saw early on the early onset of Canada's legalization with all those kind of missed opportunities like we just talked about. I mean, give me some examples of what, states, for example, like New Mexico that just came online, right? There's a lot of opportunity for new business there. So what should retail owners think about to avoid detractors in a new market?
That is a loaded question. I think one of the things that I would like turn back to the retailer and say, who do we want to service? The best retail environments are always going to be a situation where your values are reflected back at you. Okay. So if, for example, denim is really important in your life, having little pieces of the store that might reflect that as a value back at you is going to feel good. So if you're looking for a denim store and it's filled with denim, it feels great. You're like, this is my home. We want to be able to do the same thing with cannabis environments. And so one of the things that I like notice as stores tend to go and we get into new markets is that we create an aesthetically a very clean store, but it means nothing to anybody. Like it feels nothing. You're just like, this is the most neutral space ever. A neutral space isn't bad, but one of the things that it isn't going to do is get you somebody who is actively also talking about your store. So we don't just want to avoid detractors because that's important, but we also want to create people who are going out there and attracting new business for you. And so from a detractor perspective, we need to make sure that the environment is comfortable, that they are getting the support that they're looking for, whatever that might be, if that's like hands-on help or if that is being able to take a step back. And so to really answer that question is, who is our core customer going to be? And what does shopping in our store mean to them? And how can we make that feel better? So where are they going to feel the most comfortable? And in doing that, then we start to get these like better articulated retail environments that more align with when we start to think about other shopping experiences where your values are reflected back at you.
That's interesting, and it seems like a different challenge in the US. And I want to hear your thoughts on this because, like, as you mentioned with Canada, right? It first started with, I think it's like 1.0 and 2.0, right? Where you said they just now rolled out like beverages. And I think is it all edibles for THC or?
Yeah, edibles, beverages kind of rolled at the same time.
Right. So when you talk about like, to start with ensuring you understand who your audience is, who you want to go after, what consumer type, right? With cannabis, there's so many different formulations, and this plant attracts so many people from different backgrounds, every type of demographic you can think of. So I mean, is it similar or is it a bit different in the US in that perspective?
It's funny that you went immediately to product and product categories, because I think that that is like kind of naturally when we're interested in opening a cannabis store where we immediately go like, oh, my core customer is going to be a flower customer. Well, I would turn back to you and be like, well, what does a flower customer look like? Like, who are they? And instead, I would encourage people to think about what customers are going to do before they come to your store, while they're in your store, and then after. And so where this becomes really impactful is when we start to think about like maybe an urban store where somebody's walking down the street and they pop in your store, they're going to purchase a different set of products than somebody who is in a more rural environment, who is probably going out of their way, getting in the car, driving to you, parking, going inside. What types of products do they purchase? And so instead of thinking about it as like true demographics or product specific first, let's think about the customer behavior. And then that's going to help us define what some of those products might be. So, to your point about product specific behavior, we know based off of the data and the research, thanks to Headset, is that we can see that rural environments usually sell larger pack sizes of products because somebody's bringing it home. They also have a tendency to sell more concentrates. In urban environments, we see higher sales in terms of pre-rolls or infused pre-rolls. And that is partially because it has this like in and out capability where someone's on the go and they're maybe going to the park. And so just the customer behavior is different. And that starts to tell us what the retail environment is going to need as well.
You're doing mental jujitsu on me with this consulting, and yeah, you're tapping me out at this point because I mean everything you're saying makes sense, right? It's just kind of the way the lens you need to look at and the approach that you need to take, right? It's understanding the location, the foot traffic that's coming in to inform that product type rather than starting with the product type and going after that audience.
Yeah, and if you want to start with a product type, that's great too, but we need to be agile to understand where that store can go.
Right.
So it's like it's this bad thing. It's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's like are we customer first or are we product first? And then where do we need to go to service either of those two groups?
Got you. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that explanation. I want to switch gears and talk to you about, I mean, like the state of retail, cannabis retail post pandemic. So we know that the height of the pandemic was like a huge injection to the industry, right? Especially in the United States when the businesses were deemed essential. And we saw cannabis consumption rates increase, in some states even surpass alcohol sales tax. So, what is the state of post pandemic retail, I guess, in cannabis, and maybe what you're seeing in terms of data in the U.S.?
The data in the US, we are starting to see immediately sales of products that are um, more shareable. So instead of it being like large format flower, we're obviously seeing upticks in terms of pre rolls, that kind of thing, shareable products. What I think is really interesting is when we start to think about inflation and the impact that inflation could have on the industry as well. Not just from like a product formulation perspective, but if we go back to thinking about what our customer is up to, this could impact a lot of things in terms of what they're purchasing as well. And so, from an inflation perspective, I think it was CNN maybe who just did some research around how this is going to impact people. People are already starting to make decisions about what vacations they're going to be taking over the summer, if they are going to be going any vacations, how impactful are gas prices to their everyday spend. We need to make these considerations in the cannabis industry because people are spending money on these products. And so, how does that look? If people are spending more time at home, we usually see lifts in cannabis consumption. And so, could that mean that actually with inflation, we're seeing a lift in terms of cannabis spend? Potentially. This could be like another really happy storm for the industry, although we don't really, I wouldn't put inflation into a happy storm, but you know what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It'd be a catalyst
it
for
could
the
be a
industry.
catalyst for the
Yeah.
industry. So I'm interested to see kind of like how this impacts people on a day to day over the next 6 to 8 months. More specifically, though, in kind of like in our immediate future, is like impulse shareable products are definitely seeing a pretty big uptick since regulations have started to kind of lift around COVID.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I want to talk to you. I think you mentioned this, or this was part of the series that we talked about earlier with the videos that you're putting out on LinkedIn, which again are great. I encourage everybody to check them out if they have time. Let's talk about the psychology of pricing, and how that is really, really important when it comes to price compression, which you've also
Mhm.
talked about. Price compression, at least from my understanding, in what I've seen in the US, particularly in the US hemp industry, is they're experiencing price compression because of just the excess amount of hemp that's been grown, right? And just a lot of that product that's sitting, which is
Mhm.
so. I mean, what's happening in Canada in terms of price compression, and let's talk about the psychology of pricing.
So pricing compression in and how it shows up in the industry is pretty complex. I went to one day record one of these videos and realized that pricing compression isn't so simple for us to just explain it. It impacts a number of different areas. The core, we see supply and demand impact kind of the value to which a product holds. That is true at wholesale. So, like what you're talking about with the value of hemp coming down, that is also true at retail in terms of what price point we're selling products at. So if we can wholesale the product for less, do we retail it less to our customer, or are our customers actually demanding lower prices because they have so many options in the market? All of these things really come down to supply and demand. In one instance, it's extra supply of input products, so like hemp, or on the other side, it's excess supply of finished packaged goods for our customers. So it could be playing out in two spaces. From a pricing psychology perspective, though, one of the things that has happened in Canada as we have seen store density kind of explode across the country is that retailers have competed on price. So the key differentiator between a number of different core retail environments has actually turned into price. And so discounting or low prices are used to get the velocity of products moving in store. The difficulty with this is that it can make it hard for us to later sell product at a higher price point. We start to acclimatize our customer to a low price product. Now, low price products are sometimes in instances exactly what we need or exactly what our customer is requesting, but not in all. And so as an industry, it's really important for us to be able to take a step back and say, who are we trying to service with low prices? And who are we trying to service with different quality products that might not be able to fit into this low price bracket?
I've seen that. I've seen brands kind of have like three different options where they have like a value brand, a premium brand, right? They kind of like segment it out, and it makes sense because you're appealing to all types of different consumers.
Yeah, and at different points, we might purchase different products. Like just because you're a low price point purchaser in one instance doesn't mean that you're in another. Like I would use bread as a really good example of this. Like sometimes it's like the best to buy some Wonder Bread because you're going to make a grilled cheese, and sometimes it's best to buy like a beautiful French loaf because you're having friends over for dinner. You can operate in both spaces, and we see cannabis customers kind of fluctuate between different pricing bands as well. What is fascinating, though, is that when we start to position a store as a discount store, it creates that narrative throughout the entire environment. And so one of the things that we talked about kind of before we hit record was like this idea around price anchoring. And so numbers mean absolutely nothing to people without some reference point. So if we just like toss a number on a wall, it doesn't mean anything until we maybe say it's the time. And then we're like, oh, I know exactly what those numbers mean.
Right.
Well, we have customers who are coming in the store have no idea about the value or what price points are or what the price points are in our store. And so the first numbers that they see are going to influence their perception of value of everything after that. I like to use Costco as a good example of this because it's pretty well known, both in Canada and in the US, or Sam's Club.
Absolutely. My parents love Costco. Yeah, we're actually, my wife and I too. It's the best. Go ahead.
Parents love Costco. Who doesn't love a good snack, you know?
Right.
You walk in and they usually have high price items at the very front. TVs, computers, jewelry, positioned as you're like walking in the door. What they're doing is getting you ready to spend money. Everything after that seems approachable. That TV that is like $999, everything after that, you're like, so much more reasonable than the $999 TV. And so it prepares you to see all of the other price points.
That makes so much sense. You're so right. It eases you in, right? I mean, you kind of see that up front, you know the value of what that thing is, but they're all the high price, the high ticket items. So as you walk past, you're kind of relieved and you're willing to spend more because, hey, it's at least it's not $9.99 like that TV that I just saw.
100%. And even more interesting example of this is actually the McDonald's menu. Okay, we have a tendency in North America to read left to right. You will never find the dollar menu. Well, right now, you will never find the dollar menu on the left-hand side. It always has a tendency to be on the right. It has a tendency to be like where we like traditionally like to look for beverages kind of thing, like to the right. They start with like a promotion of either their newest thing or the meals. And so they're price anchoring you then too, that you are ready to spend.
Right.
Because, and it's McDonald's. I mean, everything is within an accessible price point to a degree. And so it is about creating this perception of value by what numbers you're exposed to first. And this is something that in cannabis stores, we like completely miss usually. And it's where we need to be thinking about it is like, what categories are we presenting first? Are we presenting low price product? If we have a sign outside that's like, we're the lowest in town, everything then is going to influence how our customer sees our product. So if you do have more expensive product, it's going to be harder to sell. And so it can be a little, it can help with velocity because it can help move some product if we're selling at a low price. But if you also have higher priced products, it can make it more difficult to get it moving.
It's so interesting because of how hyper competitive the industry is to begin with, right? And it seems like that would be the natural go-to for a cannabis operator. If there's a lot of competition and you want to get more sales, you maybe want to offer a discount or do something to where you can appeal to the consumer from a sales perspective. But you got to be careful, to your point, I think is what you're saying, because if you do that, you're gonna create that perception of your brand that everything's gonna be discounted or low, or I guess low quality, not low quality, but at a lower price point, right?
Yeah, like it again is how does your customer define value, and how do they understand pricing? And we help set the tone for that. All of the other things that they've ever seen or experienced in life influence those decisions, right? Like it's, if you've ever been exposed to purchasing in another avenue, that might influence how we feel about pricing. And we often see that when new markets open up and there's some sensitivity around more expensive products. It's really like we have to be able to make a decision about who we're trying to service and how they want to be serviced. And so if we want to carry more craft-based products or products that have a tendency to be more expensive, we need to be aware of what pricing sensitivity our customers might be coming in at. And if we are selling cheap and cheerful, is my favorite way to say lower price goods, cheap and cheerful products, that those are not going to undercut the value of something that it's maybe positioned right besides.
Is what you're saying and describing there, is that, I mean, because I've heard you talk about this term strategic discounting. So is that kind of what that is? Like just being diligent as to what you're discounting and when and how often?
Totally. A discount is a tool that we can pull to get some product moving for whatever reason that might be. But if we offer it across everything, it has no value anymore.
Right.
So my favorite example of this is like thinking in and walking into a store and everything being 40% off all the time. Well, then you no longer think that the product is actually 40%. You just think that they've made a price increase to mark it down 40%, right? Like
Right.
you're like, oh, it's all made up. Whereas if you go into a store and there's like everything's full price or most things are full price, and then you go back into the back corner and there's something that's like 40% off, you're like, what a deal this is. I am buying this one for sure. This is just, you've created an atmosphere of articulating what the value of product is to begin with.
Right.
And so this is a space that can get quite dangerous if we go down it too often, where we're discounting too much without it being strategic, because we get addicted to the benefits as an operator, meaning like we hit some quick cash flow. We're like, yeah, this is great, I'm going to reinvest in some SKUs. But we've then made our customer acclimatized to discounting as a way of purchasing in our location.
Got you. And you mentioned SKUs, and I'd be remiss to mention Skew Rationalization. I know you've talked about that as well. So
yeah, it's really just thinking about like how many SKUs we're carrying, what do we need to service our customer, and when are we reassessing them? It's really putting together an assortment plan. So it's taking a look and saying what's moving well, what isn't moving and why, and then taking some action based off of that. And we should be doing that on like a pretty regular cadence,
Right.
to be able to keep the total number of SKUs that we have in store a little lower than what we usually see.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah.
Well, one last question on this topic. I don't want you to give away all your secrets because I know that that's what y'all do professionally. But, I want to ask you, like, what are some basic steps that cannabis retailers can take to create a unique customer experience within their cannabis environment?
It's going to go back to understanding what our customer is doing before, during, and after. So I'll use an example. It seems to be a hot topic these days, but we have a customer who has a cannabis retail environment, or has multiple now, and has chosen to open up locations close to dog parks. It was by accident, the first one. First one was like, oh yeah, here we are. We're close to a dog park. The other ones now have been strategic decisions about where those locations are going to be. And why they did this was because they could understand what their customer wanted before, during, and after their experience. They have a common theme. All of their customers, for the most part, usually have dogs, sometimes with them, sometimes not. And so how this has informed their inventory, the way that they train their people, as well as the way that the stores are laid out, all link back to what their customer behavior is. So it's not as
Wow.
simple always as being like, we're just going to open up near dog parks.
Right.
But
they leaned into it, right?
They leaned into it.
Yeah.
And it can be scary to make that decision as a business owner, because it is almost like making a choice to actively say we're going to commit to a certain type of, or a certain group of people, to make them feel really good. We want to make sure that we aren't offending or making other people not feel good, but it's going to feel really good to a better and a smaller segment of people. Within that, though, that creates loss aversion, and then we get scared and we say, oh, but we could have so many more customers if it just felt good for everybody. It's really hard to create an environment that feels good for everybody.
It is. It's near impossible. And that's kind of the trick that your mind like plays on you, right? When you're as an entrepreneur, you're just like, in some cases, especially early or first time entrepreneurs, they want to just bite off the whole pie instead of kind of starting slow and just getting a piece of the pie and building upon that foundation, right?
Totally. When your environment and you can service a very particular group of people, they become your promoters. And like, your cost of customer acquisition exists whether you're in physical form or online.
Right.
And so who is going to help you get more customers? And really, like, when we look at cannabis, and one of the reasons why I love this industry is because you have to be much more creative in the avenues that you take to tell your story. And you can't take those traditional marketing approaches. But that also means that we have to be creating really great relationships with our customers who are out there promoting the business for us.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, to wrap up, Krista, I want to ask you, going back to our earlier in the conversation when you were talking about the importance of cannabis retail environments to be agile, right, and prepare for future growth, because as we all know, we're still kind of at the burgeoning phase of this industry, particularly in the US. I know Canada still is growing as well. So, what does the future cannabis retail environment look like?
I think the future of cannabis retail is to be determined. We are just starting to scratch the surface. There have been incredible people that have come before us, and there will be incredible people that come after us too. And the thing to remember is that we are in a very small segment of time where we are working towards destigmatizing the plant to large groups of the population, as well as create products for people who have been accessing the benefits of cannabis for a very long time. And so we are in this like weird moment where it's like not totally destigmatized, but we do have an active group of promoters of these products. And so how do you navigate that? I think in the short term, there's a couple different things that need to be happening or that are already starting to happen. And one of them is us thinking about how we're creating an environment and working with our bud tenders in a way that actually enables them to talk about the product. We are only as good as the people who are interacting directly with our customers. And the product is very complex. Like, to understand how cannabis influences you versus influences me looks very different. And so being able to put the information in the hands of the team who's going to interact with both of us as customers, and that they feel empowered and know all of the right details about product is really important. It's going to be one of the ways that we can get more people to enter into the space and then stay here without having as many negative experiences. The second thing that's going to happen, and this is more of like a business side. So if that's like the people side and that's like gaining new customers, second thing that's going to happen in the short term is a lot of merger and acquisitions. We have a ton of people who entered this industry as a way of exploring a new space, who were really excited about innovation. And as competition builds, it gets more and more difficult to operate effective businesses. So in the short term, I think what we'll see specifically in Canada is see the number of operators shrink to be larger groups. But what this offers in the long term is us to create more specific environments. Because when we get larger groups, it's harder to move and be as agile. And so it will leave room, like we have seen with craft beer, or like we have seen with smaller indie beauty brands, to create products and create retail environments where we can stay agile and in touch with what customer trends are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. Consolidation, you're saying on the business side, and then consumer front, it's going to be education, right? Really, and arming these bud tenders, these employees on the front lines working in these retail environments to really have the education and knowledge to disseminate and help consumers navigate through this complex industry.
You're totally right, Kevin, but you've also hit something that's like a total pain point for me, is like, if we just say it's education, like, what does education even mean? Like, right. in cannabis, where does education show up? Is it product knowledge? Is it sales? Is it customer interaction? We need all of these things. Education isn't just like PK. PK only gets us so far. I can know everything. I'll give you an example. I can know everything about AirPods. I could explain all of the features and benefits of this product to you, but it doesn't matter if those aren't the important features and benefits that you, Kevin, are looking for.
Right.
And so it becomes more compelling when we talk about education to say, are we enabling our teams to share the right information at the right time? And so it doesn't become, do I know all 300 points about AirPods? It's, do I know how to ask the right questions to Kevin to know which of the 100 points about AirPods I'm going to share with you?
Right. And you know what?
And that's hard. That's very hard.
It's hard. And you know what's like so fascinating about the cannabis industry, at least from my perspective, is that cannabis has been around forever, right? And the illicit market has operated in it and been around for a long time, since prohibition. So there's this subset group of people that are just super familiar with the plant and our endocannabinoid system and what it does. Or they just, and if they don't have that understanding, at least they have a relationship with the plant because they know it makes them feel better and it helps them, right? And it seems like that subset, that group, really, there's no desire, and I don't really blame them, to try to educate, because they're past that. They've just been consuming and whatnot. And there's these new entrants that are interested and curious, because more, particularly in the US, more states are coming online. So there's this canna curiosity that's happening. So it's like we're having to remind the now legal operators, hey, we got to educate. We got to really talk about this plant and the strains and the endocannabinoid system and what it does and how it helps, and product knowledge, because there's so many new consumers. So it's almost like it's like this constant reminder, I think, for the industry. And to your point, I think it's only beneficial for the entire industry if we all put that front and center: education, 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 because it's only going to go a long way in every capacity, not only just for the consumer benefit, but also politically, when it comes to regulation down the road. Like all that content's out there, right? All that information's out there. So there's no way to come back and combat it, or it'll be at least more difficult for the lobbyists to do so.
Yeah, it's us. I really feel like it's us being responsible operators and connecting the right products with our customers. The flip side of this is, like, we can't go into an environment and assume that everybody knows nothing either, right? Like there's nothing worse than going into an environment and knowing a lot about something and then being like educated. Like, no, this is not what education means. Education means that we are enabling teams to ask the right questions to know what to share when. Like, please, if I walk into a retail environment, I don't need an entire breakdown of, like, specifically in Canada, maybe why beverages only go up to 10 milligrams.
Right.
Like, I don't need that. I work in the industry. But if you were to ask me the right questions, you would understand what I'm looking for. And then we would probably be having a conversation more about flavor, maybe. And so it is really about understanding who is in front of us and not making the assumption that the person in front of us knows everything, or that the person in front of us knows nothing. Because in either of those instances, we've just created a, like, icky customer experience, right? Like, it's, yeah.
Like if you're feeling like you're getting patronized, or you just don't have time because, like you said, you're in the industry, it, like, let me just get in and get out, or ask me the right question that I'm interested in when it comes to products. So I get what you're saying. And ideally we'd have like this standard playbook, right? Where we could just hand this out across the industry. And, obviously things are going to change, but there is a basic understanding and knowledge among all industry operators about this plant and its uses and dosage and efficacy, right? I mean, is there a way to standardize this?
I think that there are opportunities in the standardization of information around the product, especially as we have more clinical research happen where there is outcomes and measurable outcomes related to cannabis use. But again, like, what I'm going to want to know about a clinical study and what you're going to want to know about a clinical study are going to be two different things. And so it still is like the nuances of who is in front of us and what information we share.
Right. Totally. Well, Krista, you are just like full of knowledge and expertise in this field of cannabis retail. And it's been such a pleasure to talk with you. I've learned a ton, and I know that the audience has as well. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more about Vetrina Group?
Yeah, you can find us at www.vetrinagroup.com. Or you can find us on LinkedIn under Vetrina Group or under my name, Krista Raymer. We post content at least 3 times a week around specifically how we can optimize what is happening in cannabis retail stores.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Krista. I'd like to have you on again real soon as the industry continues to evolve. So let's stay in touch.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all your work in the industry. This is like how we break down stigma one step at a time.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. I'm happy to do it. I'm learning every day and meeting great people like you. So thank you. And thank you all for listening. Bye.